Barry wrapped up his first season as Browns general manager, and it was an impressive season. Barry seemed to pull all the right moves, especially on the offensive side of the ball, in building an offensive line and getting some support for Baker Mayfield. He talked about what he learned in that first year as a general manager.
I think the number one thing, Jeff, has been how much time is spent with what I would call crisis management. And I realized that, we obviously had a unique season just dealing with everything COVID related. But, if it's not COVID, it will always be something else. And, there are some days where it feels like you do football in between all the crisis management, so to speak. But there's just a number of different, what I would say maybe issues that I probably underappreciated how much time it would take to be a part of resolving them, that cross your desk on a daily or weekly basis. So I think I have a much better sense of that rhythm, going into year two than perhaps I did, going into year one. So that's probably the biggest.
Andrew Barry talked about his first year as GM. Let's bring in Dan Labbe. And Dan, you go down the list. They were really good at finding players to fill in. I mean, Blake Hance, the guy that ended up playing, guard, then he played tackle. I mean, and did very well, all things considered.
Yeah, it's a credit to Andrew Barry for, having an idea of the type of guys he wanted to bring in, and having a profile of guys that he wanted to bring in. And it's also a credit to the coaching staff. These guys were really focused on developing players. Obviously, their goal is to get starters ready to play. But Kevin Stefanski late in the season really gave praise to his assistants for making sure that every guy on that roster was getting developed and every guy on that roster was going to be ready if their number was called. And we saw just over and over again, when they needed somebody to step in and play, even if they were only effective for a short time, they were able to help this team win a football game or, against the Steelers, win a playoff game in the case of Michael Dunn and then Blake Hance. So it's a credit to Andrew Barry for knowing what he wanted to find, knowing what his coaching staff wanted, and a credit to that staff for being able to get those guys ready to go in a pinch.
You've covered the Browns for a while. How nice is it to have, this is what a football franchise is supposed to look like. We knew it back before the Browns went away, but now it has a football franchise and organization has returned to Berea in it, which is really nice.
Yeah, you're not supposed to just clean house every year and do coaching searches every year. It's supposed to be little things. Now, none of that is happening this year as far as guys leaving to take other jobs and finding, new position coaches and new coordinators. But, those are the situations you want where you have young coaches who are good enough to move on to other jobs and you're going to replace them. This is the first kind of normal off season this team has had where you're just sort of going in thinking, all right, you got to supplement this roster. You won 11 games. Now, how do you get to that next step? Because you played pretty well against the Chiefs. Even when Patrick Mahomes was out there, there were some good signs that maybe you could have hung in that game if it did end up turning into a shootout. So you've gotten to measure yourself against the defending Super Bowl champions. Now, how do you get to that level and get better? And that's what you want to spend your offseason doing. You don't want to spend your offseason trying to install new systems, trying to, hold press conferences, introducing new coaches and new GMs. You just get to have a nice, normal offseason. And even on draft night, you get to kind of sit back for a few hours and wait for your pick to come.
The other thing about that is everybody is in their second year. So it's very nice. And how impressive is it that, Andrew Barry had never been a GM before and was not only ready for the position, but was ready to succeed in the position?
Yeah, I think him and Kevin Stefanski are similar in this, in that they've both came into this job or came into this league kind of targeting eventually getting these jobs. Andrew Barry's always been a guy who says that he likes to kind of be where his feet are. That's a phrase he likes to use. But at the same time, I think he's sort of been getting groomed for this. And eventually this was going to happen. So when you kind of know that, and you know that's your goal, and you know that's the end game, you prepare for it. And I think we've seen that in Andrew Barry. For as young as he is, this is something he's been preparing to do, learning from so many different people. I think we've talked about that on this show before, just learning from so many different people what it takes to do this job. And Kevin Stefanski the same way. He did it a little differently. He was in one place forever. But a lot of people came through that building while he was there. He even predates Mike Zimmer in Minnesota. And he was sort of just building towards this and growing towards this. And when the job finally came along, he was ready. And so these are two guys that Ivy League guys, really smart, knew where they wanted to end up. And I just think they've been preparing themselves for this moment really early in their careers.
So in